It's December of 1989. The night sky over Panama is filled with parachutes, and hundreds of Rangers are dropping into the wire, as the 7th ID and other units follow closely behind. But if you look closely at their helmets, you wouldn't just see the standard issue camo helmet covers. You'd see aggressive, shredded, custom-made camouflage blowing in the slipstream. As the operation progressed, unabashed infantrymen can be seen all along the streets of Panama. This is the story of Manchu Hair, or Helmet Scrim, and today, on the Gear.Locker, we're building it. The exact origins of this practice are unknown, but it was popularized by paratroopers during World War II as a way to conceal the flat metal helmets they were issued. When it rained, the scrim covered the shine, somewhat, and fast forward nearly 40 years later, we start to see it again showing up in the 1980s during Operation Urgent Fury. The 82nd Airborne could be seen tying strips of burlap to netting over their newly issued K-Pot Pasget helmets. Soon after, the 7th Infantry Division, particularly the 9th Infantry Regiment, the Manchus, developed what we know as the ragtop, or Manchu Hair helmet scrim style. They utilized this throughout the 1980s and 90s, with the idea even catching on with some other units. In reenacting circles and pop culture, this is an extremely iconic thing to see. It showed up in movies and TV shows, and even in a lot of reenactor kits where it didn't really fit. I know, we're guilty of it here. But it's just such a freaking cool look. Nevertheless, history is history, and if we're gonna do it, let's do it right. So, how was this done exactly, and can we do it right here? The answer to that second question, of course, is yes. We're gonna talk about two methods that were used to do this. But keep in mind, this wasn't an exact science. Especially because this was often quickly done and often individually made. But as mentioned, reference photos point to a couple different methods that were common with a couple different units. So per the research I've done and for this video today, we're going to talk about the styles and methods done with the 7th Infantry Division, particularly during the 1980s, especially with Operation Just Cause, and the 75th Ranger Regiment in Operation Just Cause. And I don't know if I've ever mentioned this to you guys, but this month on the channel, it's Just Cause June, and I am stoked for it. So many awesome videos, but you're not here to hear about the videos coming up. You're gonna watch those, but let's build this helmet scrim out now. The first method that we're gonna see is the net method. This one was by far the most popular method to do, and not because it was the easiest, it was definitely the most time consuming. The easiest goes to the other version, but it is definitely the most widespread, because you didn't need to make any modifications to the cover whatsoever. This method was seen with not only the 7th Infantry Division, but also the 75th Ranger Regiment. And of course, as the name implies, it requires camouflage netting. Granted, you're not going to rely solely on the netting itself, even though the scrim already on it looks kinda nice. You're also going to need strips of BDU fabric. And not just any BDU fabric strips. Let's talk about these in particular. For the historically minded people that you are watching this video, we need to use the correct fabric. Now, I've already done a video talking about all the different BDU variants from the early 1980s to the early 2000s, so go check that out. But let's talk about the first style you can use. The first being a Type 1 or first pattern BDU uniform type. It's characterized by a full twill material and green or white tags, primarily the white tags for earlier variants. If you're lucky and get one that doesn't have faded tags, you can sometimes just look at the date of the BDU. But this was definitely an earlier style, as it was more commonly seen in the mid-1980s, when the new Type 2 uniforms were getting issued out. Speaking of the Type 2, you see these in both ripstop fabric, or that non-ripstop twill. For the helmet scrim, I tend to go for the non-ripstop versions. I find that these not only fray a little bit better, but they make historical sense. As they were going to the tropical jungles, they weren't going to need to use their heavyweight BDUs, so these would make perfect donors to cut up and attach as helmet scrim. Now, some of you guys are like me and wouldn't want to ruin an original one, but you also don't want to just use standard fabric. So my recommendation is to find a BDU vest, really just a BDU jacket that's had the arms cut off. Not only can you get these a lot cheaper usually, but you don't have to worry about cutting up an original piece that's supposed to be kept in good condition by us collectors. As you can see, you can cut these strips in a variety of lengths. I always recommend going longer because you can always trim more off afterwards, but you can't add any more on. Typically, these were 1 to 2 inches in width and 10 to 20 inches in length, but again, the longer the better. Not only is this what's seen in reference photos, but Surplus Geek supports this as well, and he mentioned that in his video. You're not going to need a ton because the netting ones were sort of sparse. And everything you see in the pile in front of me is one vest worth. You can get a ton of scrap, enough to definitely cover 2 helmets. The last thing you're going to need for this method though is some paracord. This is vintage stuff and is OD green with black tick marks in it. If you can't find this, OD green standard style is fine because this isn't really going to be seen, but around here I like to keep things as original as possible. So let's begin. We're first going to take care of the net itself. To size it, just lay out your helmet, take the netting, put it on top, and we're going to cut just enough so that we can tuck the ends underneath the helmet. Remember, it's always better to leave too much slack than to cut too much off. Here's the mini time lapse. And here we go, we've got a very large piece. Now we could go one of 2 ways. For the 7th Infantry Division, there have been reference photos of guys attaching this netting to the helmet as is, with the brown and green camouflage already on it. But most guys removed this and just used the netting. So let's cut all of this camouflage netting off of the net itself. Now, before we go any steps further, I wanted to tell you guys about something. You can't trust anybody on the internet, even me, of course, but I found someone on the US Militaria forum who claimed he was a member of the 1st Battalion, 9th Infantry Regiment during Nimrod Dancer, Nimrod Sustained, and Operation Just Cause. And he talked specifically about the Manchu hairdos that they made, so you can get some context as to why I'm doing the things I'm doing. Now, I wouldn't do this blindly, especially just off of one forum post. But luckily, this method aligns with the many other sources I've seen and others that claimed that this is how it was done. Just as we've done, we've cut a square camouflage net big enough to cover the Kevlar. We gutted some 550 cord and used the inner white strands to tie the net to the inside of the helmet band. After that, you would tie the strips of BDU net all over that netting that you just attached. You want it to be just a little bit looser so that if they got caught on something, they would more likely pull off just the strips than pull off your whole helmet. Once that's all set, you're going to use the green 550 cord to tie the net to the exterior of the helmet cover, so it's at least more likely jumpable than not. Once you broke up the outline of the helmet, you are done. So now let's get started. All that we have to do to attach the net is use the cat eye band and slip it over. Now, we're going to take those white strings that we pulled out of the paracord and tie the net underneath into the suspension liner in the helmet. Already, this is very strong, so what we're going to do now is tie the helmet net to the cover itself using 550 cord. It's a little bit trickier to do, so I'm going to use some scissors just to help me push the paracord through underneath the cover, pull it out the other end, and tie it up. I'm going to burn the ends of the paracord just to seal it off, and now we get to the fun part. Here, we're going to take these strips of BDU and tie it all over the place. Again, we want to avoid it covering our eyes, but we can always trim away. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are so far, but I love this thing. This is looking really cool, and let's keep going just to fill it out a bit more. Okay, here we go. This is a really cool looking helmet, but there's another option that we could use, so let's take a look at that one now. The second method requires far less. In fact, we only need a helmet cover and then the BDU scraps, as well as a sewing machine. That's where this one becomes a little bit more difficult. This one is a little bit harder to pinpoint in reference photos because there's not an item like the net that is very clearly visible in any of the photos. However, it can be sort of assumed based on how some of the helmet scrim is laid out on people's helmets. Like if you see a very barren front shell with all of the scrim looking like it's attached to just the top of the helmet cover, more likely than not, this one is sewn on. Once you lay your scrim on top all over the place, all you have to do is sew in either a spiral or a straight line pattern to attach the strips to the top of the helmet. If you guys wanted to see me make one of these on my sewing machine, let me know and I would be happy to do it. However, to spare you all that, I put this one together ahead of time. But assuredly, this took way less time than doing the net method and is just as secure, although I personally prefer the net method simply for the vibes and usage of historical pieces. And so that is 2 methods that you can create your own Manchu hair or helmet scrim, particularly with the 7th ID or the 75th Ranger Regiment in Panama. Let me know in the comments below which method you liked better and which you're going to do for your impression. The net method or the sewing method. I think both are fantastic to do. One takes a little more work and time than the other, but again, both were seen with units in that operation. We have a ton more videos coming out on the channel, particularly around these kits, so stay tuned for that. This is the Gear Locker. See you all in the next one.